That's 858-251-6111. Or you may contact us via the internet at godradio1.com. That's godradio1.com. Now we are streaming on FaceView on Facebook, and so you're able to see us, though we can't necessarily see you here in the studio. I'm here with Dr. Leonard Thompson. We are practicing safe distancing, and he has been diligent in keeping the facility limited to people in. If we're in one at a time, we're disinfecting and we're wearing the masks and the gloves. We only took it off the gloves and the mask just to do the program since we've sanitized the room and ourselves in here. So we are proponents of social distancing, and I think we just must do that. We've got to get serious about this. We have noticed here in San Diego that the number of deaths had gone up, the number of cases are up. The pattern across the country, you don't have to be a statistician to look at Iowa or South Dakota where there are meat packing plants and see how numbers have gone from one or two infections to hundreds and several deaths at this point. All you have to do is just look at New York, and we want to, as bad as it's been, we are so grateful to Governor Andrew Cuomo for his daily, detailed, objective, scientific updates in terms of the pattern and the tracking, the sad loss of lives there. Today it was down to 400 and something. We never would have imagined we'd see a day that we would look at the loss of 400 lives in a 24-hour period as something helpful. Here in San Diego County, we lost 15 people in the past 24 hours. And so it's important that we keep putting these things out there, even though we've had close to 3,000 people tested and I think about 1,400 recovered. We still have people at risk. They're still making discoveries about how this virus operates, the parts of the body that it's attacked. We've seen that there is a real emphasis on attacking the kidneys, cases of renal failure. We don't have enough dialysis. At first, we didn't have enough ventilators for the lungs. And so this is still a very real issue. And I'm so happy to say that the people in San Diego and in the African American community in particular, which we are part of, are working and pulling together to make things happen in terms of feeding people, getting food to folks who are inbound at home and can't get out. And it's just a phenomenal expression of commitment to others. And so we're excited. You can, email a comment if you have one. We welcome hearing from you. We want it to be a discussion. We got a lot of things on our plate here. We've got the impact on worship in terms of services. We got the impact on the penal system, people incarcerated, the lack of social districting, the reports of guards violating all kinds of protocols, putting the inmates at risk. We have some people being released, others retained. So we got a lot of things happening. And the one thing at the bottom of this, with all these people calling for a reopening society, is that society as we knew it will no longer exist. It will be a new protocol, a whole new arrangement, and I think we need to move cautiously. So, Dr. Thompson, we want to thank you for continuing to make this available. We're moving toward the Zoom technology doing this as we work out the kinks because there have been some problems with Zoom. There have been some hacking. There have been a number of things happening. And so we know we're going to be at this long enough for it to make a real difference.
Yeah, and I think that just the fear of technology many times has gotten people stifled. But technology was always offered to the church. TV was originally invented to be used for ministry, and we bypassed that, saying that it was not of God. And because of that, we missed out on a very big opportunity to be worldwide with media and to spread the word. And now it's almost impossible to get on TV unless we own the network or buy it. So social media and the Zoom technology, the Facebook, and all the different social medias are allowing us back again to be able to reach the world with the word of God. So I think it's very exciting times, and I think that we have to grasp hold of it and look at the positive side of it. I was just with a church today doing some consultancy work with them, and they said that their numbers are triple the numbers that they have on their morning services that they used to have. And so we are seeing a positive outcome of using social media. So I'm encouraging ministries to really tap into the technology of the social media. It's very inexpensive. You can do it directly from your phone. You don't have to have all the bells and whistles to be effective, because when it gets all down to it, it's the word. It's the word. And if you preach the word, if you share the word will break the yokes.
And I think it's so important what you're saying. At Eagles Nest, where I pastor, we have experienced an increase in attendance in terms of people online participating, and the pastors I talk to are talking about experiencing that increase of participation.
Mm.
And many years ago, I guess about 20 years ago, when a lot of what we call mega ministries, or when ministries began to buy in, there was a particular TV station that went to gospel 24 hours, and churches were buying on. And the larger churches had the setup in terms of the equipment, doing the recording and the ability to rebroadcast. And so they did all of these things. Matter of fact, my spiritual father, Ivy Hilliard, out of New Light in Houston, Texas, in many of our training sessions, there were whole workshops and manuals devoted to helping people establish their video or recorded ministries, so that those things could be played back or rebroadcast. And so there's opportunity in all adversity. And so this is bringing an opportunity. And one of the things we're doing at the Voice and Viewpoint is right there, we're going through consultation with all the churches that we have listed in our church directory, so we can see which ones are on Zoom, which ones are, on whatever conference or outreach mechanism, so that we can begin to update their announcements in the paper, which are now online, because the paper is now online, free digitally. All you have to do is just go to www.sdvoice Viewpoint, and you can find the paper, and that's important for those who can't get out. And we still have single copy sales, but we're encouraging people, if you are purchasing the tape paper from a stand, then like anything else, you should have on gloves if you're touching metal, whether it's a doorknob or picking up something. And just for clarity, I'd like to point this out, Dr. Thompson, that the way our paper is done, for instance, tomorrow's edition is at the printer now. Once the plates are made and the presses run, when the papers come off the press, they are mechanically bungled and tied, just like you see in the movies. The workers have gloves who handle the papers. They pile the papers onto the pallets, and then the pallets are shrink wrapped. And then the pallets are delivered to the paper. And then when we open the pallets, the distributors who are there to open the paper, they have gloves. They open them, and they take the papers and they put them in their cars, and from their cars they go in the stand. So we don't have people physically uh, multiple handling of the paper. We really keep the handling of the paper almost down to the person just going in the stand, pulling a copy out. And that's why we wipe down the stands, the handles when we put the paper in, and we're encouraging people, because there are some people who are not going to go online or can't go online in terms of it, and so we want to make sure that we reach all of the community. And
Well,
so I thank you for the chance to mention those things.
well, Dr. Warren, I'm gonna jump headlong into it today. Now, I do want to talk about what's going on with these states rushing to reopen, but before we get there, let's talk about the new small business stimulus package.
Well,
Do
we
you
have
feel stimulated?
no,
Okay.
no. And it's unfortunate. We see that the Congress tonight and tomorrow will be doing this additional package. I think $452 billion, and it's geared toward small businesses and hospitals, hospital workers as well, because we don't have a national healthcare system. Unfortunately, it's privately owned, and so this is going to make a difference. But this first round of SBA, money, they ran out before they finished the application process. And so there, I think one of the things that's becoming clear when we had the recession, or really it was a depression, they played with words back in 2008. Um, all the emphasis with concern was on the banks
Hmm.
and these entities, and then Trump this time tried to make it on the airlines and the cruise ships and all of that. But really, America has never given the attention to the small business that it has to do now. And so the restaurant workers, the gig workers, the independent contractors, the 1099s, and here we are in California with AB5, which is just totally ridiculous right now in terms of restricting independent contractors and trying to make them all benefit government W-2
Employees, yeah.
employees, and that's running into some snares right now. So um, I just think that as in so many instances, when one should not put their faith necessarily in government.
Hmm.
If you're in business, and I'm saying this from being in business, business owner and operator over 30 years, if you're in business, you need to have a plan for how to grow, manage, or protect your business. And you can't run a business outside of serving your customer base that keeps you going with the assumption that somebody else is going to be there to give you some money. The banks are trying to make loans, 1% loans, and uh, but they always want people to jump through hoops for that. So we got. My heart goes out. We really need to deal with the restaurants. The restaurants are connected to the farmers and all of the small business people who feed into the restaurant business, the customers, and all of these things. I think Gavin Newsom, the governor, made an observation. He says when the restaurants come back, you're going to probably find people uh, you know, at the door taking temperatures with masks, disposable utensils, and space seating, and all kinds of things will be different. So I just hope that we don't have people looking here all excited, expecting that check to fall. And some people who receive checks are doing stupid things with the checks. So that's another topic, though.
Well, one of the things I want to say is that one of the things that we're going to have to look at is that even when we get back to the time and we reopen and they are taking people's temperature and things of that nature, we got to be careful that they don't use it as a way of discriminating against people coming in. Because if I don't want you in my restaurant, you got a fever. You know what I'm saying? And I can make it look like you got a fever because I got a little heat sensor right here.
Well, that's a very important point that you raised there because, if we go back to the 60s when we had the civil rights sit ins and people didn't want folks at the lunch counters,
Hmm.
if we aren't careful, this pandemic can be used as an opportunity to set racial progress back because we know we have people in this country
Hmm.
who think we've come too far too fast already. And so now instead of just saying, I don't want you because you're black, I'm going to hold up my little fake thing with the dead battery and say, your temperature is too high.
Hmm.
And your temperature is really too high because of your color. So, I mean, it's as crazy as it sounds. We see some crazy stuff like we saw last
Mhm.
week with Encinitas and San Diego and Sacramento, and people out there protesting about shut-in,
Mhm.
no mask, no gloves, all huddled together. So this is real.
Well, it's going to give a whole new different definition when you say, "Oh, girl, you hot," because when you say that, you talking about the temperature, and they go like, "Oh," and so we just have to be mindful that these things are coming down the pike. I really was disturbed this week. I've talked to one of our constituents, and she got a call from her landlord. And her landlord responded and said, "Are you paying your rent this month? We know that you received your stimulus check." And she said, "Well, how do you know that I received my stimulus check?" She said, "I crossed it with the IRS and your social security number." Is that legal?
I don't believe that it is, number one. I don't think that they did it. If they did it, because maybe they had their social security number from the application in order to do the initial credit report to rent the place, there are restrictions on how that information can be used.
Hmm.
I think it might have been a bluff scenario. I too had an instance brought to my attention today of a landlord approaching a tenant and telling them that they needed to vacate the property in 60 days because they needed the property back since they were going through some domestic issues, the landlord. And notice was careful not to say whether or not you paid your rent on time because in San Diego County, when the Board of Supervisors put out that directive, which we published 3 weeks ago, there was a moratorium on rents dating back retro grandfather to March 4th. And so, and yet we still have people trying to do that. So today I had a conversation with the district attorney's office, and I'm hoping that they're going to be able to set up a hotline to take these complaints. I believe the governor, in his statements earlier, talked about a moratorium on rents for 6 months. Now, this doesn't mean that people are excused from paying rents. If they're able to, you should. You know, if you go into property law and look at landlord tenant relationships, it's probably surprising to people to realize that natural disasters do not excuse you from paying rent.
Hmm.
If the house is taken away in a tornado and you still got property on the ground, technically they can holler and say, well, we want it. Maybe it can be a prelude to collecting the insurance if there was any on the insurance from the tenant standpoint. The landlord always insures the property. The tenant, most tenants don't carry tenant insurance, unfortunately, and they should. So we got a lot of issues here. In the midst of us talking about landlord tenant, we got people who are having some real food crisis.
Hmm.
And I'd like to one more time, if I would, just throw out Dr. Thompson, our phone number, 858-251-6111. 858-251-6111. Or email or and send a comment at godradio1.com. godradio1.com. Now, one of the people who sent us a message said that when we mentioned restaurants, she said that she thinks that the testing will hurt the restaurants. And testing probably will hurt the restaurants. But what is the alternative? That we just put a lot of people in there and act like business as usual and then wait 2 weeks to see who gets sick. And so I don't think that. And I don't think that we are so lonely that we need to go out and put ourselves at risk. We got some different cultural things about a gathering. If you remember the old TV series Cheers,
Hmm.
where the regulars had to gather every day, they got to
Hmm.
know everybody.
Norm.
Yeah, that was a cultural thing. You know, in the African American community, I always observed that rather than go sit at the bar and pay $3 or $5 a beer per drink, our folks would just go get a little brown bag and go home. Or the guys when they get off from work on Friday, will sit in the car in the parking lot and drink before they go.
Hmm.
That's their happy hour. So it's a cultural thing, and so all of this is very real.
Well, one of the things we have lost over 40,000 people to the coronavirus, and
48,000.
yeah, and so with that in mind, I was looking at World War II. I believe that we lost 400,000, people in World War II. My thing is that so this is really, really real that we could lose more people to this virus than we did even in the war.
It is very possible
Yeah.
that we will lose more people. At the rate we're going, I think that we will lose more people. I just wanted to, if I could deviate for a moment, because one person calling in made the observation that the landlord can't um, uh, talk about or force the tenant to use the stimulus check for rent. The only thing that the landlord can do is ask, "Are you paying rent?" And if you look in San Diego County in the court system, uh, there's been a moratorium on evictions and the paperwork. And so some landlords will still issue notices to vacate 3-day notices, but that can't go anywhere if the state Supreme Court hasn't opened it up to make that happen. So we have some fear tactics, and we've always had some unscrupulous people who own property
Mhm.
and who try to use those things to harm folks. And then we have some very good people who work with folks.
Mhm.
And so we want people to be responsible. If you can pay, you should pay. If you can't pay, you can't pay. You make known what your situation is, you register it. If you're waiting for a work or unemployment, or many times the landlords will offer to work out a payment plan, a deferred plan, so that most people, it's going to get to the point that some rent is going to be better than no rent at all.
Mhm.
And the banks are going to have to think this situation too, because they just can't decide to foreclose on everybody. If they did, we'll be in worse shape than we were in 2009. So
Well,
this is a real important time for us,
mhm.
and we want our community. I'll say our in particular. I want everyone, but my emphasis is on the African American community because that's where we come from. That's responsible for our 193 years of publication as newspapers, and we can no longer afford not to read, not to listen, not to pay attention to what's taking place.
Well, Dr. Warren, so I want to go into this next topic, and that is the reopening of cities. I don't know what they are thinking in Atlanta, Georgia, other than we need to get rid of some of these people. So we're gonna let them go back together, and so we can kill off as many as we can.
There, Atlanta's trying to reopen.
And they talking about restaurants, gyms, salons. I think open up Friday.
Okay. Well, you know what I say to that? I'm counting on the American people to have more sense than the people that they do business with. Because they open doesn't mean that you have to show up. And I think that this is a very bad move. Uh, very bad move. I think that we have to be responsible for ourselves in terms of what we do and what's advantageous. I mean, do you really need to go to the gym and put yourself in that situation? Everybody in there is not going to have on a mask. People are going to be sweating. We know it can be on metallic surfaces for 3 to 6 hours, perhaps. We know that this virus is airborne. I saw something strange today. I saw a lady that had a mask on, and the mask was multicolored, and it was cut out over the mouth and over the nose, and she had on a thick red lipstick. I thought she was going to a Halloween party or something. And I said, that's the most ridiculous thing in the world. When that was the whole purpose was to cover those areas in terms of it might not be concerned, but we know that a lot of people are what they call atypical. And
Hmm.
so they're well, but they're spreading it to other people.
Hmm.
And let me just say that we continue to get comments in as we're meeting here about the landlord. Another person has just made the observation that it's always better to talk to the landlord than to be silent. And I would go a step further and say, if you are communicating with a landlord and you're in a large structure where there are multiple people, it would be wise to make your communication in writing. One of the safest things you could do is send your landlord a certified letter explaining what your situation is, be it job loss, waiting for help or assistance, and requesting their help in establishing with you some kind of payment plan, be it incremental as money comes so that you can maintain communication. When you do that letter, you should mail one letter to the landlord and then a copy of that certified to yourself. And when your copy comes, don't open it, but hold your copy so that if you end up in landlord tenant court and you've got the certification from the landlord, sometimes they try to lose stuff. You can open your copy physically in court and show, based on your certified, that you did send it. And I think that goes a long way. So these are some steps that you can take. Because you owe does not mean that you are now put in a subservient relationship and you got to get sackcloth and ashes and get on your knees to communicate with them. That's not the case. It does not mean that you can be harassed by the landlord because implied in your lease is a term called quiet enjoyment. And quiet enjoyment means that you're entitled, if one needs to come into your place, they need to give you notice under California and federal statutes. Federal, if you're in assisted, subsidized housing, but the state has some requirements in terms of notice of to have entry. And so these are things that this is a time to get familiar with all of this. The same kind of thing is necessary with your all your credit bills, with your charge cards and things that you owe. You're home and you have time. You should write letters to these people and let them know and put them on record what your situation is and your willingness to pay. because that's going to be important that you're establishing a willingness. And if you have negative items put on your credit report during this time, you have the right to respond to them as disputed claims, which means that they have to come off of your credit report until such time as the matter is resolved. So hopefully these little things will help.
And getting back to this, the opening up, I've been seeing these rallies, and it's sad that even our president has kind of spurred some of these rallies on, that people are saying that we're Americans and we should be allowed to go back to work and we have the right to work and things of that nature. And yes, you do, but you also have a right to die, and then you also then will complain when you get sick that America's not doing anything for you. But we have to use wisdom, and I'm like, I'm looking at these people and say, really, really. Now I understand that we need to work. I understand that we need to get our finances together. Trust me, for a business that is in entertainment, that we lost 95% of our income due
Mm,
to the corona.
mm.
So we're right now operating on 5% of what we normally get in, and by the grace of God, we are still here. I understand the hardship. I understand what you're going through, but I also understand that it could be worse. And if we're not wise, we're going to find out that especially the black and brown communities are going to get out there too quickly thinking it's all good. And pretty soon when it comes down, those black and brown communities are going to suffer major losses.
Well, Dr. Thompson, I'm glad you made the observation because I'm a board member of the National Newspaper Publishers Association, our 200 papers around the country. Our papers are hurting. In many instances, they've lost all of their business. Some have closed down. And one of the things, and you talk about, you have made Goliath sacrifices to continue GOD Radio 1. And sometimes the things that we have, we take for granted, the station, the newspaper. But this is a time for people to do as our predecessors and ancestors did. I think that if you have one, you should have a donate button on your site.
Yes, sir. A
And
partnership button with it.
we call it, you call it
Yeah.
partnership. We have one on a Voice and Viewpoint. We call it donate. We have some people beginning to do that. It's okay to do that to help us continue what we're doing because we're the ones that are going to tell you the truth in the end. And don't miss something that's taking place. We see people like Facebook and Google, Gates and them. They are giving out grants in terms of journalists and media because they want bona fide journalism, and they're stressing that. We've applied for some of them. We've received some. We applied for others. They want to know that they can trust what they're hearing, because if not, we just have people getting on social media, like the statement that was made at the beginning of this virus, saying that black people were immune to the virus. There's no such thing. And so yeah, well, let's tell them they're immune. By the time half of them die and catch on, we'll be few of them to deal with. So we want to really zero in on this, zero in on our own responsibility, watch our habits and our lifestyle. We need to rethink those cigarettes that you're smoking, that vape that you're doing, and that little vapor, and the kids going forward, and everybody blowing smoke. We need to rethink, that malt liquor, and it's all right for carry out. But this is a good time if you're home to cook some and save some money in terms of carry out. It's
Hmm.
cheaper to buy a couple of chickens and cook them than it is to go to KFC and spend $40 for 12 pieces.
Amen.
And
Amen.
so, and we got to get back to some responsible living. There are other cultures among us, and I have observed this, that if you go in a store, you wonder why you can't find large bags of rice or beans,
Hmm.
because rice and beans are a staple that people are using in terms of protein and they're eating. And we're going to have to get back to some very basic stuff in terms of what we do.
Yeah, and I think that kudos to everybody that has a garden and
Oh,
the
yes.
community gardens that are really doing it. Kudos to people that are sharing online of how to make food and how to make it stretch. I always laugh because my mother could have a pound of ground round and it would last for a whole entire week, and we would have a different meal with that 1 pound of ground round. I still to this day don't know how she did it, but she did it, and it is allowing us to begin to value the simpler things in life. You know what I'm saying? A good old pot of pinto beans right about now over some rice will bless your soul.
Oh, it will bless you. You know, and Dr. Thompson, and you saying that, and I can remember some of us have hardship stories. When I was very young, my family lived in the projects in D.C., and that was back when they had coal fire stoves. And I mean, many a times we had navy beans with some Karo syrup to
Yep.
just kind of cut through and sweeten it up, you know. And so it's important not to forget where we've come from. There used to be an item, we don't see it in the store anymore, but you might remember your mother or grandmother using fatback for seasoning.
Fat back, salt pork,
Yep.
ham hock.
Yeah,
Yeah, I remember all
but
them.
the ham hocks and stuff was more expensive. The
Hmm.
fatback was greasy, but it was a seasoning,
Hmm.
and sometimes it was a fatback sandwich that you had, you know.
Yep.
And we didn't have a lot of wax paper, so you wrapped it in that brown paper bag, and it got all greasy, but you still carried it with you
Hmm.
for what you had to do. And so we've come so far. And let me just say that on the food item, because if you look at the food lines, in some places there's thousands of people. I've seen the lines grow here. We have for the past 3 weeks been participating with different feeding sites of Voice and Viewpoint, and we've been putting papers in with the bags because in the paper we have printed copies of many of the things like where the meals are for the kids or the laptops or what the ordinance is saying so that you don't get duped by landlords or other people. And so a lot of people are still going to read stuff. And we're close to like 1,000 papers a week that we're putting out with this. And we're saluting Jacobs, my brother's keeper, paving greater future, Muhammad Mosque number 8, the efforts that's come out of Greater Mount Zion and out of Project Hope, and all of these people
All
that
people
are
for justice.
engaged. Reverend Harris, he had one today, a feeding, and Sister Cheryl Morrow from the Monitor, she had been producing, had people hand sewing masks to be distributed, and so there's more production taking place, and we're helping each other.
Okay, I got it. I'm gonna change the subject again on you.
All right, please.
Okay, the price of oil is now under $1. Matter of fact, it's in the negative zone. Why am
Per
I
barrel?
per barrel?
Yeah.
Why do I still got to pay for gas? Why can't I just go and fill up my car because they're selling barrels of gas at a loss right now?
And you say, why should you what?
Well, if they selling it and they giving it away, basically, can't they just give away the gas?
No, they're not going. It's not going to come down to that. You got to understand something about the gas, and I'm glad you mentioned this because a lot of people miss it.
Well, wait a
What
minute. Let
happened?
me just say this. Do you remember when gas was 25 cents?
Oh yeah, I remember when gas was 15 cents.
See, I really believe we right about now we need some 15 cents a gallon
I
gas.
don't think we well bread was 15 cents, was 5 cents a loaf in those days too. So no, I remember, and I remember when cigarettes were 20 cents a pack.
Uh-huh.
But you know, when we start, if you want to really revisit some of that, you get the old papers that we have at the Voice of Viewpoint. You
Mhm.
go back 50, 60 years, and you can see some of the prices in there. That's like when you could get 5 pot pies for $1.
Mhm.
Okay, and you could get 5 cans of peas and 5 cans of corn for $1. So in those days, they had the paper bags, and if you went shopping with the paper bags, then you had 7 or 8 paper bags when you came out.
Mhm.
Because I used to bag groceries and carry people's bags to their cars and homes, and that's how I made my money through school. So, but today, you notice when they started raising the prices and they got the handle on plastic, they stuck the plastic bags in because the plastic bag wouldn't show the emptiness as much as a paper bag. And so, yeah, the gas situation is threefold to it. First of all, most people don't realize that the federal government in the federal excise tax makes so much money on each gallon of gas that's sold. So that's always been a factor influencing where prices are. What we have right now was something that the Russians started as a battle. They started to flood the market because America had reached the number one peak as an oil producer on a global scale, and they wanted to drive all of these new oil producing entities in Wyoming and Texas. I mentioned fracking before. You told me to explain it to people. Let's say we just got companies that are producing oil, and if they are not making at least $50 a barrel in terms of the American producing, then the people in America producing oil are doing it at a loss. So in a supply and demand ratio, the Russians figure if we drive the price lower than $50 and we can maintain it there long enough, we will drive those people out of business, and then we can raise the prices again. Meanwhile, Saudi Arabia gets into the picture in terms of the oil scenario. Trump does have enough sense to replenish our reserves in California, where we always have these prices gouged at this time of the year because the excuse used to be that they have to switch from winter to summer product. But this time there's such a glut that they shut down some of the refineries, but people are not driving because we're on the stay at home mode. And along with that, we see the auto insurance companies now beginning to offer rebates back to people on their policies because they're not using their cars the way they wanted it to. Meanwhile, in San Diego, the sale of bicycles is up
Hmm.
because people are buying more bikes to get the fresh air, to get outside. And so you have a topsy turvy scenario. And I always say to African American entrepreneurs that if you look at every change that takes place in society, there is a business opportunity if you are wise enough to zero in on it and see how it's going to work and look at how you might fit into it. And could
So,
say more, but I'll hold back.
so I'm just still trying to figure out why we keep on messing. Russia been doing a whole bunch of stuff. They gave us Trump. Now they
Yes,
messing with oil,
yes.
and they still trying to influence it. They got the folks out there. We Americans, let us be free, and they even influencing that nonsense. When are we gonna shut Russia down and just block them out? Why don't we put a moratorium on all Russian products?
Well, we can't shut Russia down. Our global relationship has reached a point where you really can't shut people out. Did you know, for instance, if we shut down Russia, we wouldn't be able to get our astronauts down from the space station because we stopped sending people up until they just started again sending the supply ships that we can now turn around and bring back. Elon Musk that
Hmm.
started doing that, but before that, we shut the program down
Hmm.
almost 10 years ago, and we have to rely on the Soyuz to get up and back.
And SpaceX,
Yeah,
you know,
we just had to astronauts come back after 280 some days up there, and they landed in Uzbekistan, wherever over there. So they surely didn't come back and land in Miami
hmm
or off the coast of Florida.
I'll be like saying, look, I know I'm an astronaut. I always wanted to go up, but since y'all don't have a way to get me back, and we're gonna rely on Russia, guess what? I'll just simulate it.
Well,
W-
we can't get rid of Russia anymore. We can get rid of China.
Well, let me ask you this question. Now that we're talking about this, what about this whole moratorium on immigration?
Oh, isn't that an interesting
That's a
one?
good one.
Yeah, he just started this one. You know, it's interesting that Governor Newsom last week, I believe, announced a $150 million program to go to undocumented workers because he realized that without using them, California being one of the agricultural capitals of the nation and the world, with all the things we produce here, we stood the risk or stand the risk of losing these crops and having
Hmm.
greater economic damage. And so, what I gather what Trump has done, as I read it, and I haven't finished looking at the executive order, is that they're limiting travel. But if people are already have green cards or they're coming for as migrant workers, they're going to let some of them in. Now, that's not a new thing because back in 1964, 65, we had a migrant program called a Bracero program. And the Bracero program brought workers in from Mexico to work the crops, and at the end of the time, they went back. Well, they were already doing that from the 40s, coming into Florida from the islands to do the citrus crops and then go back. And so we don't quite know what the full impact of this 60-day moratorium is, but Trump is playing to his audience. This is another way of playing to that white element that has decided that racism is greater than democracy. And I want to keep them words going out there. They see racism as greater than democracy. When you rather ignore the Constitution, as Mitch McConnell has done, ignore the Constitution as the Republican Party is doing, which forced those people to go out and vote to get a court order to vote in the midst of the pandemic, and now the folks are uh, surging in cases of the virus, and people are dying. And if you look at the lines of the people in Wisconsin that were standing out there, they were black people. And there we know from the statistics that while we might be the smaller number in places like Louisiana, Chicago, 30% the population, but 70% of those that are dying.
Hmm.
And so that's race. That's the race card at work here. That we know who's driving the buses and doing all of that stuff is us,
Yeah.
and we're at risk.
And that's one of the things that I've been noticing, that there's certain industries that are flourishing at this point. The janitorial business is flourishing at this point. People are bringing people in from left and right. There's so many businesses that people are literally getting more involved in, and I tell people consistently over and over again that there are jobs out there. We have to determine if we want to do some of the things that are out there.
Well, I'm glad you said that, Dr. Thompson, because we have a lot of people in our community that have decided that there's certain jobs that they're not going to do.
Hmm.
And we have people in our community in the best of times when you're thinking about employment, they're not looking for a job, they're looking for a position.
Hmm.
And this has to be a situation where people they want to work. And I think Cuba is a good example of how this situation has been handled in the past. There was a time when the embargoes were on Cuba and the college professors and teachers and folks weren't getting paid because of the national government controlling. It was found for the few tourists that were going that some of the women who were the streetwalkers and the prostitutes in the hotel district, they were your doctors and nurses and teachers. But they had turned to the one thing that was producing some money when they didn't have money. We saw
Okay, hold on, doctor. Hold on, doc. I want to put a precursor right there. Doc is not saying that y'all need to go back
No,
to the
I'm
older.
not telling you anybody. Thank you.
Okay, because
No.
it was going left there for a minute.
No,
It-
we
oh.
know. We're not sending anybody. I'm trying to show an example in other cultures of how people have set aside to deal with whatever was available for them. And, in Liberia, when we had the Ebola crisis, we had a scenario there where there was great coverage about the women who were working the streets and how they were the sole support for their families based on the nature of the society. And so their families were suffering because with the no touching, the business was gone. Now, I'm not saying we need to go there, but my point being, Manpower advertised 100 and some jobs. People are hiring
150.
150 jobs. So if people are hiring, then roll up your sleeves if you healthy and take a stock clerk job if it's going to give you supplemental income at night to make it work. And don't be too proud to work. You see, the bougies are the ones that suffer. The real people down on the ground, they're going to survive, they're going to work, they're going to do what happened. But if we got people who just think that they've been above work and they can't get their hands dirty, they got problems.
Well, I applied to go work at Walmart, and they asked me how long could I work for, and I said it's until I find out where all the sterilization napkins are, and as soon as I get that and get my discounted supply, I'll be done. I didn't get the job.
Of course you did. But I like to share this with people, Dr. Thompson, that I've always been a worker, and I've always been a hustler in terms of being able to get out there and make it on the streets without doing anything illegal and understand how things work.
Mhm.
So when I came to California and I couldn't get a job with all of the degrees and credentials I have, I took a job in a liquor store, $5 an hour, part-time. I used my car in the evening to collect cardboard and newspapers
Mhm.
so that I would have gas for my next run.
Mhm.
This was all long before I ever got a paper or got a job. And so by the time, and this was significant, I was looking for construction because I had come here having been a GS-15, doing very well, but in a different environment and a different time. But my mind was set on survival
Mhm.
and working. And that's what we have to look at now. What can we do? How can we turn adversity into opportunity?
Break that down again, because I think that this is what makes people of color so uniquely fabulous. When adversity comes, we turn adversity into triumph.
Yes, we do. And our grandparents did the same thing, and they didn't get hung up on titles.
Hmm.
You know, and in what, 70, 80 years ago, one of the richest black communities was in Atlanta, Georgia.
Hmm.
And the people there were not in high tower apartment buildings at the time either.
Hmm.
They were housekeepers, domestics, waiters. Um, my grandfather was wise enough in North Carolina when he saw that there were no jobs for black men. He went to work on the railroad.
Hmm.
And he spent 44 years there, bought property, took care of family, and did all those things. But he knew he had to be away from home some
Hmm.
to make it work. And so that's what we have to do. We have to look at where we are. And
Hmm.
see, this is the culture that I see that comes across the border.
Hmm.
People who are willing to work. The culture that I see of people coming here from the Pacific Rim. People are willing to work. If you notice closely, you don't see these people driving any old cars, do you?
No.
Now, part
Well,
of
well,
this,
I do see them driving like 20 deep in a car,
yeah, it
but
might
give them
be.
a couple of years and they all got brand new cars
But
themselves.
let me show you real quick where the racism comes into the picture with that. Because you and I can be 40, 50, 60 years old, and we could have spent our whole life buying things, not believing in credit,
Hmm.
paying for what we got. So then you go in, say to buy a car, and they say, let me run a credit report. And the credit report comes back and says, well, you don't have any credit.
Hmm.
Well, they look at you and say, well, you're a bad risk because you don't have any credit.
Hmm.
Okay, now if that's true, how do we explain? The guy gets off the boat. He says comes through the gate. He says his name is Gonzalez or Lopez, and he's the same age you are, and he goes to buy a car, and he has no credit history. Or his name is Mustafa, and he just came over here as a part of the repatriation program that America allowed. He has no credit history, but he's going to get a loan. And Bank of America was so bold 20 years ago is to give the matriculadores cards to people for up to $5,000. So if your name was Lopez or Gomez, you could come in there and get a $5,000 line of credit
Hmm.
with no problem. But people living here couldn't get it. This was the racism. And so we need to be aware that we got two things working. We got our own attitude about work,
Hmm.
which is important, but we also have the system's attitude about how we should be treated. And if you let those two things come together against you without being aware of what you're dealing with, then you're going to be suffering some real setbacks.
And Dr. Webb, I hear you, Dr. Warren, I hear you loud and clear on this, but this is the one thing that I'm really pushing people is stop making excuses. Don't make any excuses because, the man did this and the man did that. Use your creativity. One of the things that I met a young lady, and her husband was in a car accident.
Okay.
And she had a good job. He had a good job, but he was in a car accident and needed 24-hour care. She had to figure out a way to bring money into the house while she took care of her husband until he was able to take care of himself again. And she found one thing that she did good, and that is baking.
Yes.
And she started to bake.
Yes.
And now everything is better, and the baked goods is still
It's still
bringing
rolling.
it in. So I just want you all to begin to think about, what do I do well? You know what I'm
Yeah.
saying? And then think of some creative things. One of the things that I'm finding out is that more and more people are asking for housekeepers and people to
Yes.
clean up. I'm
And
looking at,
you know what? I am
uh,
so glad you said that, Dr. Thompson, because black people have a problem with that. And we've had a problem because there was a time that was the only work that we could get. Now, I'm going to show you a story that is right on point with this.
Mhm.
Many years ago, when my late wife and I lived in Bonita, we had a housekeeper who was from Peru.
Mhm.
And we had a housekeeper because the way we work with the paper, it was no such thing that my wife was going to stay home and take anybody in New Jersey. She wasn't going to do it. And we shared in our responsibilities and we were busy. So I had this housekeeper from Peru who, when she came to work for us, she was in the early stages of a pregnancy, but she was still working. And we only worked about 4 hours a day. And so one day I was home and she was cleaning and she was in my study. And I happened to pass by and notice that she was standing there reading my law books. She was going there my law books row by row. So I thought that was interesting because I got the impression she didn't speak that much English, but that wasn't the case. So I had a conversation with her. It turns out that she had been an attorney in her home country. She came here and she married a Navy guy,
Hmm.
and she got a job with this thing called Aunt Annie or whatever it is. It was this little white lady like Betty Crocker that had housekeeping service,
Hmm.
and she hired all of these people to work in the service, and she was paying them peanuts while she was getting the money. And she was smart enough when she set it up to come to Voice and Viewpoint and run the ads with us. And so what this lady did was so interesting. After she had her baby, well, even before that, she when she got so that she understood the business, she left the lady, went out on her own. She started doing 2 houses a day at $50 a house, 4 hours. So she was making $100 a day, 6 days a week, and it was all her money. After she had the baby, she brought the baby with her to work, and she picked the jobs that she did, and she let people know what she wouldn't do. She wasn't washing windows and scrubbing ceilings and all of that. And she was able to maintain it. Now, I say all of that because a lot of us know how to do stuff, but for us, it's like, oh, I'm not going to clean anybody's house. I'm not going to do that. And so we let pride get in the way of business. Like a lot of us don't want to do janitorial work. And so the Latinos get the business. Some of us might own the business. Like I have a friend that owned it for a while back east, but after a period of time, the Latinos are doing the work. They're going to start their own business. Why they keep working for you? There's nothing wrong with that. So we got to get people's minds rewired to
Hmm.
what is it that's needed.
And then also realizing that the things that used to be something that we needed, you know what I'm saying, aren't the same things.
No.
So you shift. You begin to shift. I saw a young lady today because everything's about hair weaves and things of that nature.
Yeah.
I saw a young lady today pull her hair back, and I said, so that's the unique. She has a special unique that makes her weaves look like real hair.
Oh yeah.
And I mean, I'm talking about real like you don't see no line no and when I saw the technique that she showed today, I said, "Oh, she got that patent."
Well,
Because
the sisters that's listening to this now, they gonna talk about how slow you are catching on, because that's been going on for a very long time, and there are different styles of it,
Mhm.
and some people can
I get that,
do
but this
stuff.
was a
Yeah,
new technique.
yeah,
And
but
and that's
people,
what was so dope about it is that, that even in all the technology that's out there, she still came out with something brand new that people are striving to get.
well, the brilliance of Madam C.J. Walker is not dead, and I would invite all of us to go on HBO and look at that series in terms of what she did, and the brilliance of the product that she put out. If you really look at it, we might have thought that Mary Kay had the first idea, but it looked like Mary Kay just copied Madam C.J. Walker.
Yeah.
And
And
so we still got a chance to. There are new things. Let me make this observation. Some years ago, I spoke to a graduating class of high school students, and this is something I told them that I never forgot, and I'm sure they never forgot. I told them that the jobs that they are going to get in their lifetime have not yet been created. So if the job hasn't been created, how do you prepare for a job that doesn't exist? And the answer I gave them was that you prepare by learning how to learn,
mhm.
learning how to learn. And that was one of the things I learned in becoming a lawyer, that in order to represent a person, you have to learn their profession, you have to learn their issues. And if you learn how to learn, then you're going to be able to make multiple adjustments. People like Paul Robeson. I mean, he was a lawyer before he became an actor.
Mhm.
You got all kinds of people with talents and skills going in different directions. And you're not going to have just one job in a lifetime. I've had 12 careers in my life. And
Mhm.
so how many do you go? You have as many as the things that you can reinvent yourself to do. And
Yeah.
this is a time to think reinvention for us.
And I tell people, if you want to be creative, just walk outside and just turn in circles a few times, and you will see a way to make resources and money and things of that nature because it's all around us right now.
You just have to stop and still your mind, cut that hip hop off, the noise, and no disrespect to my brother Overstreet and his efforts, because all music ain't good music. See, Dolores Tucker fought it for that. But if we stop to think, we need to have time to think. And if we think of what George Washington Carver did with the peanut. I mean, here's a man that took a peanut and did 400 and some things with it. And so,
From one peanut.
and we got technology today that he didn't have. You know, we don't even have to go to the library anymore.
Mm-hmm.
I've said many times in this program, when I was a kid coming up, I had to go to a bookmobile, go through a card catalog, order the book, come back next week and stand in the snow and hope they brought it to
Mm-hmm.
me.
And you know, Doc, I'm just being real. I'm in my own little laboratory trying to figure out how to cure the corona, because
Yeah.
whoever cures the corona is going to be a multi-billionaire.
Oh yeah, the world will be they'll be wealthy, but you know, we got to look at it as bigger than the corona because I think the corona is just the beginning of a whole new wave of what's going to happen. There are going to be other pandemics to come, and a part of it is going to be. Here's where I think we're going to see something, Dr. Thompson, which is important. I think we're going to see just like the malls are changing and the malls are empty because people are not going to brick and mortar. They're ordering online and
They
getting
saying that
deliveries.
Macy gonna go out of business.
Yeah, they're going out of business and people losing. Um, the commercial offices are going to go down because people are going to realize they don't need that overhead with folks working at home. And so there's going to be a reshaping of America. And some things that are expensive now are going to become very inexpensive.
Mm-hmm.
So we need to think about what we buy, how we shop, what we spend. And we're going to be able to shape what's happening. One of the greatest needs right now in this country is tractor truck drivers. They need over 10,000 truck drivers to move the products that are here. Lady was on showing the docks being empty because the cargo is not there. But even when the cargo comes, that's the problem. Why the farmers are pouring milk down the drain and plowing, squashing things over because they can't get stuff to the market.
Like I said before, I still don't understand it when we got all these National Guards that are truck drivers that can move this product.
Because we have not had the kind of leadership in the states. It is the state that can activate the guard and work with the farmers to make this happen.
Mm-hmm.
But the states haven't seen the role because so many of them are looking nationally, and so many of them are still looking at Trump in terms of how that is. That we're not going to get, and we need the leadership. When we get the kind of leadership that could come from someone like Gavin Newsom or Andrew Cuomo, or in this case with Biden, it's going to be, as Obama made reference to it when he endorsed Biden, the restructuring of America because we got to create it all over again. I mean, Trump messed it up, tore it up, and now he's breaking it up. And if we don't watch it, he'll have us, as one person said, he'll have us in a revolution, going back to
Civil
what
War, yeah.
yeah.
Well, Dr. Warren, our hour is up.
Can't believe it.
Our hour is up. I know that we have the general conversation that we've been having, but I really want people to understand that we have these conversations, and these are the conversations that we want you to continue with your friends and your family because we have to be creative. We have to learn how to use our God-given talent, our God-given gifts to do what's going to make a change. The things that used to be a standard are no longer a standard. So let's take the things that seem to be uncomfortable and let's make it work for us and grow. Let's do some things that we might not have considered doing before, but that will bring about a change and that will grow your family and the strength of you during this time. On behalf of us here, Dr. Warren and myself, I just want to say thank you for tuning in, Dr. Warren.
I want to thank you for tuning in. I want to thank those who sent comments. One comment was that we need to read more Think and Grow Rich, amazing stories of blacks making it beyond adverse conditions. We want to open up our minds and just take advantage of these things. I want you to put God back in your picture if he's not. I think this is a good time for prayer and reconnection. We go online with our services for Eagles Nest in terms of Sunday mornings for both Bible study and for our morning worship. There are other churches that are doing the same. We're open Monday through Thursday from 9 to 12. And we certainly can put up how we can be connected with if one calls or emails in terms of that. And so let's make this a wise time. Don't run out your door and join the people. I noticed at Troyer's Lake today that even though the gate is closed for people driving in, there's massive parking on the street and people are going into the park to walk. Maintain your social distancing. Wear your mask and wear your gloves. Don't be in a hurry at anything you do. Don't let people just stand up, get on top of you, get next to you. Don't grab doorknobs and handles and gas pumps without a glove. The virus can be alive and well on that. Wash your hands, sanitize if you can. Be careful with what you use. Because the weather is going to be hot in the next week. You'll be getting excited, but it's not over. The virus is still there. So until then, stay strong, stay in prayer. God bless you, and thank you.
God bless you all. Good night.